This is Karl and you're listening to the SMB Community Podcast, produced by and for the Small Biz Thoughts community. We're dedicated to making every IT professional a successful IT professional. Hi, this is Karl. Welcome to another SMB Community Podcast, and I'm joined today by Susanne Tedrick, who is a very interesting person who I have sort of marginally connected with in the past, and then found out she just released a book. So welcome. The book is called Women of Color in Tech, and it's by Wiley Press, and it's like 2020, right?
Yes, just released.
Absolutely brand new. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Sure, and Karl, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm glad we're talking in person. So I am Susanne Tedrick. I currently work as a technical specialist for IBM, and my day-to-day involves helping companies to understand how cloud computing can help them specifically, whether it's creating applications that are born on the cloud or modernizing their current infrastructures. In the last 5 years, I've transitioned from working primarily in administrative and operations roles in financial services, and I've managed to create a career for myself within technology. So the book that I've written, Women of Color in Tech, is in large part based on my experiences transitioning into tech and serving as a guide and a resource to other women of color who are interested in pursuing a technical career, but perhaps don't know where to start, don't know where they fit, and don't necessarily have the information or resources to make that step. And so that's where the book was born from.
So I have to say there's a few chapters that specifically address women of color in tech, but a lot of this is just really great information for anybody who is thinking about a career. I mean, I'm super impressed with how many resources you mention and all of that. So how did you find all that stuff?
Yeah, so thank you. And a lot of that was just from my own curiosity, things that I got involved with. And things that I was paying attention to in terms of like what is happening in the future of technology. So thinking a lot about blockchain or artificial intelligence, which are very emerging technologies that will become mainstays fairly soon. So a lot of that was just from my own curiosity, things that I learned in school or through volunteer opportunities or hackathons. And I put it in there because it's really important that you understand the entire landscape of what's out there and what interests you. Is it artificial intelligence? Is it 3D printing? Is it automation? These are good things to know to help inform your decision on where exactly you think you'd like to land.
Right. So, in the CompTIA executive committees that I've worked on, we always say that, technology is everywhere. Like every job is technical, right? But
yes.
There are technical jobs that pay $10 an hour, and there are technical jobs that pay $50 an hour. And so, when you say in tech, you really mean quote unquote, a real tech job, a tech focused job, not necessarily like a data entry job.
Right. So when I think of tech careers, obviously there's some tech careers that may be a little bit more business focused, but that doesn't mean that there isn't that technical element that's necessary. Like you still need to understand, what languages are being used by software development teams, even if you yourself are not coding, or understanding how to cleanse data if you're intending to be a data scientist. So while you may not necessarily be in the weeds, so to speak, you do need to have an understanding and know it well throughout in order to have a conversation with a diversity of audiences.
Right. So you mentioned that you transition into a more technical role. So Was it hard to get your foot in the door at a big company? Because IBM's a pretty big company.
Yeah, I often joke that like Watson made a mistake on my application. Like, there's something wrong with the AI. Yeah, it's hard. And especially hard if you don't have technical skill in the more traditional sense. If you didn't go to a prestigious four-year program to study computer science, it can be tricky. The important thing that I try to emphasize is that while you may still be developing that technical skill and becoming more proficient, there are things that you currently have that you can bring to the table that are just as important, if not more so. One thing that I always keep citing to people is that, engineering type professions require you to have a vast knowledge of what you're talking about. But if you can't convey that to people, if you can't convey simple concepts and ideas, it's not really going to be very, very helpful. So knowing how to communicate, know how to manage projects, being customer service oriented, these are things that are just as important, and companies like IBM are looking for in their professionals.
So how big is the average client that you work with? You said, you help clients figure out, what's the big picture and how technology can help them. How big are these companies?
They're very big, multinational corporations. I primarily concentrate with media and entertainment and energy and utilities companies. So they usually have large infrastructures, usually have revenue of over $100 million a year, and multiple offices. So definitely complex and definitely never dull.
So that must be good for your ego to say, just little old me is giving this advice, for companies that are spending a boatload of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for the ego. Well, I won't lie about that. But I think it's also great when they have that aha moment, like, and you've helped them get to where they want to be. It's very rewarding to kind of see that, and when they think of you as someone that they trust versus, like, oh, you obviously just want my money.
Right. Well, I primarily work at a much smaller end of the market, but, I find that the most successful engagements are not about technology. We use technology, but it's really about solving a problem. People come in and it used to be that we would sell tech, and IBM's a great example. You would sell tech by saying, you need a computer, here's why, da, 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 and you're like trying to convince them that they have a problem. I think today, technology is much better at saying, look, this brings opportunities, this fixes stuff, and yeah, we use computers to do it. But it's really, I think today more than it's ever been, it's about the solutions more than it is about what specific technology is used.
Absolutely. And, thinking about clients and, kind of the things that they're going through, the challenges that they're having, they really need to know that you're not just there to just, come in, do a demo, feature, and, sign off on this SOW. They really need to know and understand that you're really just trying to get them to their ideal end state. And, it can be a mix of different tools and services, but ultimately you're trying to fix a problem, as you said.
So let me switch gears and talk about the other stuff you do. So you have a blog, and I hope that you're out speaking to groups and trying to talk to as many people as possible. You're actually involved in several different organizations that actually do what your book is focused on, which is helping women of color in technology. What are some of those organizations?
Sure. So through IBM, I am involved with their P-Tech program, which is a 9th through 14th grade school model. Kids come in and they earn their high school diploma, and they have the option of continuing for another 2 years and getting a degree in technology or engineering. And then they can either get full-time employment, or they can choose to go to a traditional four-year college. So I serve as a career mentor there for juniors who are like at that point of, okay, I'm scared to graduate. What's that going to look like? I'm like, I've been there.
Right.
So helping them kind of navigate what the future could potentially look like. I also serve as a workshop virtual assistant for Black Girls Code. And so Black Girls Code is committed to having more women of color enter into the field by having workshops from age 7 all the way through age 17, 18. They do workshops. They also do a number of different programs with universities, as well as partner with larger organizations to help get that funnel and get that vested interest. And recently, I just became involved with an organization called Empower, which offers programs to women of color and military veterans who are looking to transition into technical careers.
Very cool. So how do you have time for work?
That's a great question, and I'm sure my boss would love to know that too.
Well, and you wrote a book, right? So it's, you have
Yeah.
to do that as well. So
Well, so I think for me, it's really important. And so from my personal perspective, I always try to make time for it. Statistics have shown that women of color are more likely to enter into fields where they see successful, thriving people that look like them and share their experiences. So I always try to be visible and present in their lives so that they know that this is possible. This is not just for little old me. This is something that if you're interested in, I can do. So I always just kind of make that a priority in terms of my time. I'm also really fortunate that IBM and my manager specifically know how important community service is to me. And so they always give me the means and the resources to help out wherever I can. I just recently won a badge for 250 volunteer hours, and they're like really happy, and they're like, keep it up.
it's nice to have an employer who supports that.
Absolutely.
Very cool. And so when you go, I'm sure you go to conferences and things. Do you see a growing number of women of color at these events?
So I see them at Women of Technology events, which I'm glad to see it there. I think where I would love to see it more is for more of the industry standard events that tend to happen. So things around cybersecurity or cloud native application development. There was a conference I went to recently for Kubernetes, and the amount of women of color that was there was a little disappointing. And it would be great if we can find ways to tap into that pipeline and into that interest so that they're more present and they're participating where they're panelists or speakers.
Right. There's so many ways for people to get scared by technology, not just women of color, but everybody. I mean, people look at it and they go, oh, I don't want to learn programming, I mean, I can tell you. So years ago, when I was an undergraduate, I loved the idea of computers, but they were super, super new and you had to learn how to program. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Later, like 5 years later, I learned to program, but I sort of got into technology through the back door because there was that vision in my head that you had to learn to do that. And I know that you've taken programming courses, but would you say that that's still a requirement?
It's a requirement for my role specifically only because I tend to work with enterprise development teams. And so it is important to kind of understand what their pain points are, what are the common issues that tend to come up. Now, I don't necessarily need to know enough to build like an application or to do anything mission critical. And I think for all involved, that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to know, but I don't think it's something that is a hard prerequisite for many technology jobs unless you are specifically going into that area.
So are we to the point where it's like there's reading, writing, math, and computers? Like you need to have a certain level and just get over it. It's kind of like you got to learn to read. You got to learn to do a little programming.
Um, Again, I don't think necessarily programming specifically. I do think that most people need computer literacy. And I think that's true regardless of if you come into tech or some other field. As you said, tech is everywhere, and it's just unavoidable. So general computer literacy, understanding how computers, how they talk to one another, I think those are very important. I don't think coding though is like hard and fast, you have to do
That's good for me.
it.
So well, it's funny because in grad school, I learned a lot about databases because of just the nature of what I was studying in grad school. But then that database understanding helped me to learn how to manage programmers, even though you would never pay me to code anything. But it helped me to manage. And then again, it's sort of that along those lines, it evolved from there.
Mhm.
So, anything you do that's related to what you want to do is a step in the right direction.
Exactly. I think that's the important thing. Like where it is you're planning on landing, those are the skills that you should focus on. So if you're someone that is interested in data science, like understanding R, understanding how databases work, those are important things for you to know versus I need to program in Python.
Right. So, in your book, you talk about everything from jobs at really big companies to really small companies to being self-employed. Um, would you say that girls should look at a different, I guess, set of classes in college, depending on which of those they're thinking about?
Yeah, I definitely believe that whether it's formal education or informal education, you definitely want to make sure that the classes that you're taking are kind of relevant to the path that you're going towards. I'm always for taking classes for just personal enrichment, but you want to concentrate on the things that are going to be most impactful for your career. So if you're, let's say, thinking about starting your own startup, it would probably be beneficial to take a class in entrepreneurism and business and finance specific courses, because you're going to be concentrating more on that than perhaps product, as you're starting up.
Right. So, we are recording this at the beginning of what is going to be a recession. So it's not technically a recession yet, but, give it a minute. Um, so uh, I only mention that because I know that I think you and I are of one mind about formal education. A lot of people say, oh, you don't have to do that. Just go to a trade school. It's like, maybe, but if you get a 4-year degree, when there's a recession, when times are slow, when they're laying people off, you'll be one of the last people to be laid off and one of the first people to be hired back. And it's just, I think it's super important that, anybody not get sidetracked away from that, even in a recession.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like making the decision of pursuing formal education or not to pursue it, I always talk to the individual and talk it through about what their long-term goals are, their plans, and whether or not that fits in. I'm very candid that most technical jobs do require a 4-year degree. There are some tech jobs that perhaps it's more your portfolio or your personal experience that make up for having that formal education, but I still see it as a requirement for very many technical occupations. So that I say this to people just to keep that in mind. It's like yes, college is expensive. Yes, it's a lot of things. But I do think that there are some intangible benefits that come to college. I think what you mentioned is also important in terms of like long-term longevity in the market. But in terms of network building, when you build those networks within college or formal education, they tend to transcend your career, and they can prove to be very valuable in the long term. So
Right.
it is something to consider.
It's interesting. So probably last year, 6 months ago, I would sit on panels, and one of the questions would always be, oh, how do I find good texts? Because they're so hard to find and they're so expensive and all that. And I just imagine in another month or two, that question won't be asked anymore. It'll be, oh, all these people wanted me to pay them so much money, but, I'm flooded with resumes and I don't have to pay $80,000 anymore. So, in the days when you can't find a resume, then you pay more money. But in the days when you're inundated with thousands of resumes, one of the easy factors is, do they have this degree? Do they have that certificate? Do they know these languages? And if the answer is no, whether it's fair or not, they get eliminated pretty quickly.
Yeah. And taking that a step further, sometimes it's not even a hiring manager that's doing it. Sometimes it's an applicant tracking system that just literally just like, you're never going to see the light of human eyes at that point. So no, you're absolutely right.
And I get that it can be incredibly depressing to be looking for a job, but hey, the AI doesn't know who you are. They don't care.
Sadly.
Hearing is not programmed into it. So, so on a different note, what are your favorite technologies that you work with at IBM? Since you get to play toys,
I definitely get to play a lot with artificial intelligence. So I have been deepening my understanding of machine learning and neural networks. So that's been really cool to kind of experiment on my own and kind of see what I can build and what I can do. Obviously, I spend a lot of time in cloud. So talking a lot about, kind of the advances in computer networking and edge computing, which is also pretty awesome. So those are the two that I concentrate primarily on. And there's no shortage of things to learn in either one.
Are you on a team of people who do very similar things?
Yeah, so the way how my team is comprised, there are people like myself who are technical specialists, and we know the product and the technology inside and out, and talk about it on very specific levels. And then we have what we refer to as architects. And so they have a high level understanding of the solution, but they're also thinking more about business requirements, where this client is trying to go, and how do we kind of create a solution that's going to make sense for the use case that's in front of us.
So you've been trapped like everybody else for a few months in your apartment. So clearly you're working remote now. Do you always work remote, or has that been just because of this recent situation?
Yeah, so for a sales engineer, and I can only speak to being a sales engineer at IBM, I traveled quite a bit. I think last year I had 17 trips.
So you go to the clients and say,
right,
here's what we can
go
do.
to clients. Right, go to clients directly and traveling to trade shows, speaking at those, type of speaking engagements. Obviously, there isn't a hard requirement to be in an office, because the mindset is we want you to be out there with the clients, understanding what they're doing and being in their environment. So being at home isn't really too much of a stretch. But it's the first time that it's like, oh, I can't go anywhere. That's the problem.
Well, and then you get these, I call them taunting notes from the airlines that say, oh, you didn't have any miles last month. I'm like, yeah, I know that.
It's like, thank you, Captain Obvious. It's like, thanks for
thanks for rubbing that in. So Very cool. Well, I hope you get on the road very quickly here and start getting back to the whatever the new normal is. So, um,
Absolutely.
what kinds of things would you like to see, happen in our technology communities to, basically what can we do to open up for women of color?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I mean, there's, the book is kind of catered to women of color specifically on the things that they can do. But when I think about workplaces and managers, I think what's important is that they really understand that diversity and inclusion isn't a feel-good thing. It's something that is crucial for business and for the world. And so when you start looking at it more as a business imperative, your products and solutions improve and your touch points with clients improve dramatically. I keep citing the McKinsey study from 2018 that basically showed companies that really invested in diversity and inclusion saw their financial bottom line improve versus the ones that don't. And I'm like, I don't know how much else you can articulate that. I'm like, it's not a touchy feel good thing. It's a business
Right.
thing. And so I would love to kind of see businesses treat that a little bit more as an imperative versus a nice to have. I do think that many are getting it, but perhaps not at the pace that I would necessarily
Right.
like.
It is interesting because, for the committees that I sit on at CompTIA, obviously that's one of our favorite studies because it's literally clear as a bell. More diversity equals more ideas, more brain DNA getting mixed in there, and you come up with more interesting stuff, period. And you make more money. So,
Right,
uh,
right.
it's like, okay. So, but it's hard sometimes when you go in, like when I go into a room and it's all men, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Right. And it's hard from both cases because you have to be open to it, but you also have to figure out, all right, where do we create opportunities? And, we need to work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that it's a matter of, kind of checking yourself a little bit in terms of implicit and explicit biases that sometimes may be widely held. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, well, unless you have this degree from this school, like I don't want to talk to you. And I think that's so limiting because there's so much talent out there. I mean, with the historically Black colleges and universities, from other programs that are dedicated to women and women's colleges. I mean, there's phenomenal talent there, and just thinking outside the box and making the effort, I think, is really, really important.
Very good. Well, sadly, we're just about out of time, but what's the best place for people to get your book?
So the best place to get my book would be wiley.com. You can just type in my name and it will pop right up.
Very cool. And we'll put a link to that down below. And I wish you great luck with that. And with luck, we'll rope you back into the CompTIA community. You've won an award or two there. And and I don't know if I mentioned your book. I put my eyes on your book because you won an award at the Nonfiction Authors Association. So congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I'm beyond thrilled.
All righty. And we'll also link to whatever websites and resources you want to send me.
Will do. It's been a pleasure, Karl. Thank you so much for having me.
All righty. This has been another SMB Community Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the SMB Community Podcast. If you found this useful, interesting, or fun, please subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a thumbs up on your favorite social media. Please check out the show notes at smbcommunitypodcast.com and give us your feedback.